Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular City Council meeting for Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. I'll now call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Miller.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Dara.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
All members present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And before we get started, I just want to make a note that this meeting is being held in accordance with the provisions of the Iowa Public Information Board for electronic meetings during COVID-19 pandemic, as was declared by the Governor's emergency proclamation. So with that, I'll look to item 1, which is approval of the regular meeting minutes of January 4th. Is there a motion to approve this item?
So moved. Second.
The motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? That passes. And I'll ask Madam Clerk, do we have any agenda revisions tonight?
I have no agenda revisions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. That brings us to our special order of business tonight, first being item 2. This is a public hearing on the proposed funding of distribution of the state's community development block grant funding relative to the CARES Act. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on, are there any written communications filed with the city clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll now turn it over for staff comments, and this will be Director Stephanie Sheets.
Thank you, Mayor. As the council's aware, Cedar Falls received a notice that we would be receiving some funds through the state CDBG funds. That's round 2 of coronavirus funds through the Community Development Block Grant Program. And we will be receiving nearly $370,000. And we had a public hearing several months ago related to some projects that we were proposing. However, the state felt that some of those were not eligible projects. And so we have been discussing with them other opportunities that we might have and how we might best utilize those funds. And so we are having this second public hearing based on that revision, and because we have a contract then on the council agenda to move forward with the state for a portion of those funds. So if you recall, originally we proposed playground equipment and expansion. We were targeting possibly 2 different parks. And the feedback we got from the state is that is not an eligible project under this funding. And so we worked to identify some other city equipment related to the pandemic, for example, expansion that we had to do of our network, different upgrades like that, and went through a couple rounds discussing with the state as they found even some of those were not eligible. But what we have tonight is what the state is prepared to move forward with in terms of a contract. So we're splitting that in the staff report list that we are proposing that a portion of it go towards service agency funding, in total a little bit over $125,000. A portion towards city projects and expenses of about $90,000, and then another portion toward our local schools, just a little bit over $125,000. In terms of the city items that we are proposing, it includes things like a couple disinfection lamps, some hotspots and Chromebooks that the library could benefit from to continue with virtual access. Some social media monitoring. There's a software out there where we can do some analysis to improve our communications, and we're going to focus that on COVID-related communications. And then also a software upgrade that we needed to do that also enables our staff a better remote working. So those are the types of things that are included in the list of city funded items. We did review this with the Housing Commission, and they recommend approval of these changes, and so we're bringing that forward for public hearing and for City Council approval. So with that, let's take any questions.
Thank you, Director Sheets. And before that, I will open it up for public comment first under item or section D. So does anyone from the public wish to speak on this item or ask questions? You can have use your raise hand icon or press star 9. Give that a few moments here. Okay, seeing none, then I'll consider the public hearing closed and bring us over to item E, which is a resolution approving the proposed funding distribution for the CDBG CV2 funding relative to the CARES Act. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Motion and seconded, and open it for council discussion. Seeing none, then it's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Cyrus,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Takes us over to old business, which is item 3, passing ordinance 2980, amending chapter 20 subdivision of the Code of Ordinances relative to final plat phasing upon its third and final consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
A motion and seconded, and open it for council, excuse me, for any public comment on this item. And for council discussion. So seeing none, then it's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Cyrus,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item 4 is a resolution extending the face mask mandate for the city of Cedar Falls, adopted by resolution 22097 on September 8th, 2020, and extended on October 19th, 2020, and December 7th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
A motion and seconded. Before going to council discussion on this, does anyone from the public wish to speak on this item? You press star 9 on your phone or your raise hand icon. Seeing none, then open it for additional council discussion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Dunn, please.
I just want to point out that we are still, obviously, we're being held virtual. We are still on the high alert for the county health department. Nothing's really changed since the last time that we extended the mandate. So I hope that we continue to listen to the experts with our county health department and continue to extend the mask mandate.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Dunn. Any other comments or questions for this? Okay, seeing none, then it's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Cyrus,
Nay.
Dunn, Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
No.
Cruz,
No.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara.
Aye.
4 voting aye, 3 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Clerk, so that does pass and moves us over to our consent calendar. So these items will be acted on by a single voice vote, a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or the public requests that a specific item be considered separately. Does anyone from the council wish to pull an item 5 through 9?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Dunn.
may I pull 6 and 7?
6 and 7. Okay. And any others from the council? And I see from the public, if you raise this or raise your hand with the star 9 button or the raise hand icon, I see Mr. Skane has an item he wishes to pull. So go ahead, sir. Which item would you like to pull tonight?
It's already been pulled. 7. I'm interested in 7, and it's been pulled.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay, so I'll read items 5 8 and 9. These are 5, receive and file a mayor's monthly report for December 2020. Item 8 is receiving and filing committee of the whole minutes for January 4th, 2021. And then item 9 is approving applications for beer permits and liquor licenses. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? And those do pass. And that brings us back to item 6, which is receiving and filing the resignation of Keisha Randall as a member of the Human Rights Commission effective October 5th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Been motion and seconded, and open it up for Councilmember Dunn. Questions or comments?
Well, the letter is concerning. It's disheartening. I hope that we get to the bottom of what we can do as the council to make this commission succeed and bring about true change. So the letter from the commissioner, or what's their title? I can't remember. I'm sorry. Okay. It's just concerning. It's disheartening. Not because they're feeling the way they're feeling. It's just that what are we doing? What can we be doing differently to support that commission so that it's successful and actually does, I think, what the job that we set forth for it to do, so that job gets done. And I think Councilman Dara has brought that up before about, I don't know if we're having a work session or what, but I think we need to do some work with that commission. So that's really my comment for 6 and 7. I really want this, Cedar Falls is a great city, but we do have lots of room for improvement, as does much of our country. And I just want to make sure we're tapping into the resource that this commission gives us. These folks are very qualified, and I hope we get down to discussing what we can do to make it the best it can be.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Dunn. And I'll open it also with, I know Mr. Skane had wanted to pull this item. So did you wish to speak on item number 6, Mr. Skane? I'm unmuting you here. Yes, go ahead, sir.
I just wanted to pull 7, and so far you're only talking about 6.
Okay. All right, thank you. So with that, if there's no other comment or questions from council on number 6, then it's been motioned and seconded to receive and file the resignation from effective October 5th of Keisha Randall. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? So that does pass and brings us over to item 7, which is approving recommendations of the mayor relative to the appointment of members to boards and commissions. And is there a motion to approve this item?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Motion and seconded. So for Mr. Skane, I'll go ahead and have him ask his question or comment first. So Mr. Skane, go ahead.
Yes, one of the elements that I wanted to explore with the people who are the appointments is that it seems like there is no clear effective direction that the commission is committed to, because it was voted to put down the idea of investigating complaints. And I was wondering what the individual appointments, what they feel the commission can be most effective on. So I'd like to have you talk about what their applications said about that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Skane. So looking at, and probably for the people who are on the selection committee could chime in as well. The main attributes for those boards and commission members that I had found helpful when I did my selections was one is a current staff member at UNI, and I'm very much interested in seeing how UNI and the city can partner much more effectively in human rights issues, since so many of the topics overlap between our two groups. Also, one is what I would consider a strong, solid member of the community. She's not engaged directly or in a profession for human rights. She comes as what I call a regular resident who has a passion for human rights considerations. So that's her. And then the third is a retired UNI professor who has a proven track record of engagement and successful engagement in human rights, education, outreach, and advocacy. So I have been asked a few times about why all three appointees are white in this. And as I've said previously, I have learned this year, one of the most important things I've taken away from these kinds of discussions last year was that racism isn't Black people's issue to fix. In our community, it needs to be, we need to be involved as white people to fix the racism that white people caused. So that's why I have no concerns about bringing forward white candidates. Certainly, it's important to have representation, and we do have 25% Black representation on the commission right now, which is higher than our 2.5% current population of Black people. So,
Mr. Mayor.
yes, and Councilmember Hardy, certainly, please add in since you were on that selection committee.
Yeah, I got it. I was honored to be on the selection committee, and we specifically talked about in the interviews the direction that the committee was going. This was a big concern, and we wanted to make sure that the new commissioners would be okay with the direction of advocacy, education, and outreach specifically. Now, there's another piece, and instead of doing the investigations in-house, which can open up a whole can of worms and be difficult without consistent training and doing it all the time, the state is very, very qualified to do that. But what we are going to do is and correct me if I'm wrong, but the ICRC is going to come up and train some of our commission members, from what Nicole was talking about, to help people in the community submit claims, help walk them through that, and help be an advocate for them in that process. So the new direction was very clear in the interviews, and all the candidates were 100% on board with the direction. And just to talk a little bit about what Kelly said, because that is a concern, the letter is disheartening. I believe the resignation was effective in October, that the joint meeting with us, the clarification of the direction we're wanting to go with the commission, and being an advocate for people submitting claims, that while we still have a ton of work to do, we are moving in a positive direction, and the new commissioners are 100% on board with that direction. So I'm really hopeful that we're really going to make some big steps. And I also hope, to Frank Dara's point, that we, in the very near future, will also get to have another meeting with the Human Rights Commission and get an update on how it's going with these new commissioners and what strides we're making. So that's all.
Okay, so any other questions or comments from council on number 7?
I would just, if I might, Mayor,
Certainly, please, Councilor.
add to Simon's comments about how important I think it is. I think that as disheartening as the resignations have been, it's given us some areas to work to recognize maybe where we've missed the mark so far. And you throw in the fact that in our resiliency feedback, issues around equality and inclusion and affordable housing and those kinds of things have been brought up as an element of needed element of resiliency in our community. So I really feel like our future joint meetings with this group are really critical, and hopefully they're going to be scheduled fairly soon, and so that we can hear what their issues are, they can hear what our questions and our concerns are, and really raise the bar as far as this particular board is concerned. I hate to see all the resignations, but sometimes to get a baseline like we now have, there's nowhere but up. And so get a group of people and get the council committed to it. We could really do some good things, I think. So like I said, as much as I hate to see the turnover, that tells us something. So let's do this right from this point on. And I want to thank those folks for stepping up to join that committee.
Thank you. And I'll also note that we have one more appointment to make in the coming weeks. And so we'll be soliciting candidates for that as well. And you should see that in a few weeks. Any other comments or questions on this, item 7? Okay, so it's been motioned and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Yeah, that passes and brings us over to the resolution calendar, which is these items acted on by a roll call vote in a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or public requests that a specific item be considered separately. Does anyone from the council wish to pull an item from 10 to 13?
Number 10, Mayor.
Okay, so Councilmember Miller has 10. Any others? Okay, and then any requests from the public to pull an item 10 through 13? Seeing none, then I'll go ahead and read items 11 through 13 and circle back to 10. 11 is a resolution approving and accepting a low bid of lodge construction for the Union Road Recreation Trail project and authorizing the city engineer to execute the required contract, bond, and insurance using the electronic file management system from IDOT. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and seconded?
Are we, excuse me, Mayor,
Yes, is there a point of order?
did you want to read the rest of them?
Of course. My apologies. So then also, so we don't need the motion for that. And then item 12 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an entitlement community block grant COVID program contract relative to the CARES Act. So that's item 11 and 12. Is there a motion to approve those items?
And 13?
And 13.
13. And item 13 is a resolution approving, I got too many scribbles on my paper now. Item 13 is a resolution setting February 1st, 2021 as the date of public hearing on the maximum levy rate. Is there a motion to approve 11, 12, and 13?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Yep, motion and seconded, and this requires a roll call vote.
Tyers,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And that takes us to item 10, which is a resolution approving certificate of completion and accepting the work of K. Cunningham Construction for the Center Street Recreation Trail Project. Is there a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
The motion and second. And Councilmember Miller, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, there were a couple things that have come up throughout the process of this being completed. I just wanted to check with Director Schrage and make sure everything is approved. I believe there was some work that was going to happen on Cottage Row, and just wanted to check in with him. And I assume that's all been completed, but just wanted confirmation.
Thank you, sir. So Director Schrage?
Yes, Mr. Miller's referencing there were some punch list items on Cottage Row Road that dealt with drainage and the elevation of the existing roadway and the trail. And I know that Principal Engineer Mr. Firehelm has been working with the DOT to get those corrected. And actually our crews did that here a few weeks ago and got those addressed. So actually, this process of finaling out DOT projects can be fairly lengthy just due to the audits that are required on behalf of the DOT, and they are not doing in-person audits right now. Everything is trying to get done electronically. So.
Okay, does that answer your question, Councilmember Miller? To your
Sure
satisfaction?
does. And I guess just one more thing thanks to everybody involved with this. This is a great project for North Cedar, and glad to see it completed.
Indeed. So with that, it's been motioned and seconded for this item, and if no further comments, then this requires a roll call vote.
Byers,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So next is ordinances, and we have items 14, 15, and 16, which all deal with amending the Code of Ordinances for poultry. If council doesn't object, I'll have Director Sheets give an overview of the entire, since they're tied together, give an overview of the entire group of them together. And I should know from speaking with Director Olson or with Attorney Rogers earlier today, if one of these items doesn't pass, since they're tied together so closely, if council doesn't object, I'd like to consider all not passed. It's very difficult to have one move forward while the others don't. It just wouldn't make sense. So would council have any objection to this approach? It's a rather unusual thing, but okay. So with that, probably for the sake of order, I should call to motion at least one of these forward so that we have the room to get a council brief. So I'll go ahead with 14 then, which is passing an ordinance amending Chapter 6 Animals of the Code of Ordinances relative to permitting poultry in residential areas upon its first consideration. Is there a motion for this item?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded, and then I'll open it for Director Sheets to give an overview of all three ordinances at once. Director Sheets, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as kind of a reminder, this discussion was held by council in July of 2020, talking about chickens. And at that point, staff was directed to draft an ordinance that included several provisions. The provisions named at that committee meeting were allowing 10 poultry to be licensed annually, kept in a clean, sanitary, and enclosed structure, a 25-foot separation from neighboring residential dwellings, to allow them in the backyards of residential zoning districts, and a provision for termination due to any health reasons that might be a mandate, countywide, for example. And so I'd just like to briefly explain the proposed code revisions, as the mayor noted, that are listed in the packet as items 14 through 16. I'll go over them in aggregate and just kind of touch on a couple of the highlights, and then I imagine there's some questions. So staff report goes over mentioning how Section 6 relates to animals in Cedar Falls, and so we made updates that align with the Iowa Code Chapter 717B, and also align with significant changes that have been made in Iowa law regarding animal neglect. So we thought that while we were visiting this, it would be important to take a look at those and propose changes there. We added definitions of poultry, coop, and run to directly address what we're discussing tonight. And the definition of poultry, since that was discussed, we thought that that would be good to have a definition so that it didn't vary based on where you might find it and what dictionary. And so what we have put forward is that it would be defined as one or more domesticated chicken, turkey, goose, or duck. So that's what's currently proposed. Section 6 also has already a variety of provisions related to dogs and cats, and many of those seemed appropriate to the consideration of poultry. And so you'll see in several of those sections, we've simply added poultry. We also added the requirement of a license, which is outlined in Section 6-45. Section 6-60 works to include some potential types of noises that could occur with poultry that might be nuisances. Since we name the dog and cat types of noises, we wanted to try to take an attempt at what some of those noises might be. It's not all inclusive, but at least it tries to name a couple of those. And then Section 6-301 through 6-308 are really the meat of addressing some of the provisions that council directed from that committee meeting. So section 6-301 restricts poultry to the rear yard, requires a coop and run, identifies that 25-foot spacing from another dwelling. We also took care to think about a corner lot and observing the appropriate setback on a corner lot as well. That the owner be required to live at the property. So there is some monitoring of these animals. And we didn't restrict it simply to a residential zoning district because we do have some zoning districts that are mixed use. And so we've addressed it as poultry allowed in a residential block to try to handle that situation and have some flexibility. Section 6-302 requires the license and a land use permit. So the license is related to having the animals present there, where the land use permit then deals with the coop and the run and the 25-foot separation. Those are examples of things that are commonly handled by a land use permit. Section 6-303 states that only female poultry may be kept and limits that total to 10. Section 6-304 outlines the coop requirements related to minimum size, details about how it needs to be structurally sound and kept in a safe and secure condition, as well as addressing the materials that may be used. Section 6-305 relates to the poultry run, covering much of the same criteria as what I mentioned for the coop. Section 6-302 clarifies that a land use permit is required for the coop and the run. This is the point where we would have a dimension drawing and we'd be able to verify rear yard, the setback, like I mentioned, the size of the structure, that type of thing that we are regulating. And so that is why it's helpful to have the land use permit involved. Section 6-307 provides for revoking the permit if the code is not met, identifying that this could potentially be a nuisance type of issue. And Section 6-308 addresses any potential health advisories where the keeping of poultry might be considered a public health issue, and we might have to address that. I've also mentioned in the staff report that there was quite a bit of discussion in July about how code enforcement would be handling situations. And so we did try to do a comprehensive review of our nuisance codes and try to identify anything that we thought might be good to suggest a revision to, so that we might be as equipped as possible to handle situations. However, we really don't know all the different situations that might come up. And so I wouldn't say that this is all inclusive. It's just our first go around about trying to identify those. So we are recommending a revision to section 15-2 to add item 43 that does declare that it would be unsanitary conditions about a coop and a run could be considered a nuisance. That kind of goes along with elements that we already have in the ordinance, but it's kind of a belt and suspenders type of approach. And then section 15-83, just slightly amending the terminology so we don't have confusion about terminology, and also trying to standardize it with our definitions about, we're using the term animal much more than we're using the term fowl or even poultry, for example. So like I said, we really don't know all the issues that we might encounter, and we anticipate that it's going to be a case-by-case basis, and there could be issues that we may not be able to address. And so we're recommending that, we're just going to have to see how implementation goes. And we may need to visit the ordinance after a year and consider any updates. I've also mentioned in the staff report, due to those unknown factors and our concern about what they might be, the number kind of becomes a concern for staff, knowing that we might have situations we won't be able to fully deal with. And so I'd just like to reiterate our recommendation of starting off with a smaller number and maybe starting with 3 versus 10. And then we can always amend the ordinance after a year and increase that number if our experience is going fairly well. So with that, I'm available to take any questions about the ordinance and have discussion.
And I've got the ordinance in front of me. Interesting, we're looking at 3 different ordinance groups. So I'll try to keep it so we're focused on the one that's in question that we're voting on, but we're probably going to steer off into other areas too, related to the other 2 ordinances under approval. So I'll do my best to keep us on that. But if it's about chickens, it's probably going to fly.
Mr. Mayor.
You got
Or
that.
not fly. Sorry.
Councilmember Cruz.
I guess I don't have in front of me printed out 14. It was pretty lengthy, but I believe in that ordinance 14 is the definition of poultry. And when we talked about this at the meeting a year or so ago, I was thinking of a more expansive definition than just the stated chicken, goose, duck, turkey. I also thought of quail, pheasant, dove, squab, because people, if you're going to do something along these lines, they want to have something unique. And with COVID and staying at home, what better time to have something with some uniqueness here? So that's something I wanted to put forward. And then the second thing, which
Can we deal with that one item first?
okay.
And I would entertain a motion then if you'd like to change that.
Yes, I'd like to make that motion to include, in addition to the four stated, quail, dove, pheasant, and squab or pigeon, I guess.
I'll second it.
And I am, gosh, this is a long one. I was looking for where that is in the document, just so we have it in the right section.
I believe it's section 6-43, 42, sorry, 42.
Just above 6-43.
Hey, all right. Thanks for the help. Shoot, I still don't see it. What page is that on in the council packet?
Page 94.
I guess while you're looking, I could throw a comment that if these particular additional types of birds are problematic, for some reason, we can review it, like Ms. Sheets said, a year from now.
Okay, so looking at that, so could you repeat that, Councilmember Cruz?
Along with what Director Sheets had said, that a year from now, we're going to review this. So if these particular birds are a problem for some reason, the additional birds, we can certainly review that. But I think it adds some uniqueness to the things that we're trying to do in Cedar Falls to help people during COVID and give them something unique to do in their neighborhoods with families and that sort of thing.
Okay, so with that, making those additional changes, for Madam Clerk, do you have those additional fowl or poultry?
I do. I have quail, pheasant, dove, squab, pigeon.
Squab, pigeon and squab, I guess they're kind of the same.
Great. Yeah, so that's here. I'm sorry it took so long to get it. But yeah, under this section, poultry means one or more domesticated chicken, turkey, goose, or duck. So that's been motioned or seconded to amend it to those additional fowl. Any further discussion on that amendment alone? Okay, so all in favor of approving to add those additional fowl, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so I'll need a hand sign on that. Get everybody's screen up here. So all in favor, raise your right hand, please. I see 4 in favor. And all opposed, raise your right hand. I'm sorry, so it was 5 in favor, 2 opposed. So that does pass, and we'll add in quail and the squab and pheasant. And what was the last one?
Dove.
Dove.
To that original item. So with that,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, please, Councilman, or excuse me, Jackie, City Clerk, go ahead.
fine. I didn't see the hands because your screen was shared.
Oh, okay. Let me stop that then. Okay, so let's try that again. Raise your right hand for aye. So I have Cruz, Dunn, Miller, Harding, and Dara. And then opposed was DeBur and Cyrus. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. So that brings us back to the original motion as amended. And Councilmember Cruz, you had a second item, is that correct?
I know it's referenced in ordinance 15 about the coop dimensions and things, like some comments, but I don't know if there's any paragraphs in 14 I need to reference. I could throw my comment out there that the specific dimensions, we state 3 square feet for every individual poultry bird. We really can't do a one size fits all because birds like turkeys require considerably more space, and doves and quails. So I'm kind of jumping into 15, and I don't know if anything in 14 will refer to that. But there's a sentence in here: the poultry coop shall be sized appropriately based on standard bird-specific animal husbandry rules. So instead of having to write a specific number, we're referring to something like the Iowa State veterinary school or some other source that has standard published husbandry guidelines.
Attorney, and just as a question, Attorney Rogers, do we have to specify it for the sake of legality, or could we just refer to that other document or whatever the state standards are? Or do we have to have it in our code to make it official?
We don't have to identify a specific code to make it official. It'd be up to staff to adopt an appropriate authoritative source for that, I think, when they administer the ordinance.
So would that meet your request then, Councilmember Cruz, to pull out the specific dimensions and
Correct. There's a sentence in here that says the poultry coop shall be at least 3 square feet in size for every individual poultry kept there. I would strike that sentence. I know it's in ordinance 15, but I'm not sure if there's any reference to coop size in 14.
Okay, so strike that sentence, and does anything need to be added?
Further down in that paragraph, what it says, the poultry coop shall be sized appropriately to accommodate the total number of birds. I would add, should be sized appropriately based on standard bird-specific animal husbandry rules, which is generically saying what the industry says is standard. And you can Google that. I mean, even with chickens, there's large-sized birds and there's small-sized birds, and some require 2 square feet, some are okay with 1 square foot. So if we have the language of the code referencing another source of husbandry vetted guidelines over the decades for that type of bird, I think we're okay.
Well, then before I can move forward on that for the discussion, I need to get a motion for that. So it has been moved in order to add in sized appropriately for state and animal husbandry rules in that section, and then striking out specific dimension requirements from that. So does that capture the?
That's my motion, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right. So is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Harding. So it's motioned and seconded, and now Councilmember DeBeer, you have a question for that?
Wouldn't that then make it so they could make it smaller where it wouldn't be healthy for the animal? By taking away the minimums.
I could respond to that.
Yes, please.
The sentence I strike is saying you need 3 square feet in size, which is dramatically oversized for some birds. And if you build something too big, you're going to have a problem keeping it warm and heated. You want to properly size your coop based on the type of bird you're raising. And by stating standard bird-specific animal husbandry rules, the term animal husbandry, if you Google that, it's to take care of your animal in a humane and sufficient way for their health and safety, or health and comfort, that sort of thing.
Okay. So that still is on the floor for that amendment. Any further discussion on that before we vote that up or down?
Nowhere in the ordinance does it say that you can't, I know you probably wouldn't want to, but that you couldn't mix the type of animal in the same cage? Does it say, like, if you can have 10 poultry, could you have 1 dove, 1 chicken, 1 pheasant, 1 peacock, 1 whatever? I know peacocks weren't on the list.
Yes, you could.
You couldn't
Yes,
have a
you allow-
peacock based off our list.
Okay, so Director Sheets, did you have a response to that?
Yes, the ordinance allows for a mix.
Okay, and then Councilmember Harding?
I was just saying you couldn't have a peacock based off of our list because it's not on
No.
there.
Right now. And then Councilmember Cruz?
It's, I'm trying to think of the right word, standard knowledge, if you're in the business of raising these animals, that some get along really well with each other. Chickens and ducks do, geese may not, and so on down the line. So standard husbandry rules will tell you right away what would mix together and what wouldn't. But, you know, in theory, you could have one of each, two of each, something like that. But then you have to size specific for what you're trying to raise. But in my years of farm background, I don't see, you don't mix those things. Maybe chickens and ducks, but that's about it.
And there is a licensing requirement for this. So things like that could be brought up as part of the educational piece before they really move forward. I guess that's part of the land use permit also, even before they have it. So it would make sense to bring those things up, those kinds of concerns. So it's been motioned and seconded to change the language so it takes out the dimension requirements and then adds in and sized appropriately for state and animal husbandry rules. So all in favor of making this change, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so I see that the ayes have it. And I don't need a number, do I, City Clerk? I just have to know whether it passed or not. Do
The
you
only
need
nay I heard was DeBoer, correct?
Okay, yes, that's all I heard as well. So 6-1. So that is included in this new document. This, thank you so much. This is a great discussion, so we can get it how council wants it to be. This brings it back to the original discussion of 14. Are there any other changes that are desired to 14 before we take a vote on
Mr.
it?
Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Cyrus.
I know a little bit about chickens, but I stopped and talked with my friend Camyar one day, and we talked about chickens, and he had his backyard chickens for many years, and he's a great guy, and I value the things that he says about them. He said that the maximum he thought it should be is 4. He also said it should be 25 feet from your property line, not 25 feet from a building. He was actually willing to have a committee that would.
Councilmember Cyrus, it sounds like you're looking to make amendments. So before.
No, I'm actually not. All I wanted to say was my little bit of piece here while we're talking about it. I'm not trying to make an amendment because there'd be too many.
But it's the point of the discussion is to have things that are changed in the document itself.
I understand. I just want you guys to consider these things.
Cyrus, please, sir. It doesn't make sense to have everyone pontificate if it's not something that's going to go into the document. We have to keep order in these meetings to move forward. So if you'd like to propose an amendment that we change the number, I would certainly entertain that. Would you like
Mr.
to?
Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Cyrus.
Mr. Mayor, could I interject?
Yes, please, Councilor, Mr. Rogers, go ahead, sir.
Given council's actions on the coop, there's similar language affecting the run on a specific size. Council may want to consider making the similar change to run in section 6305, given its previous action on the amendment. That section 2 does specify, I believe, 10 square feet for every individual poultry kept.
Okay. So with that, I'd entertain a motion then for Councilmember Cruz. Do you have one?
Sure. I would like to edit the language to insert, again, standard bird-specific animal husbandry rules as it pertains to runs in section 6-305. And
Okay.
so at least 10 square feet.
Okay, so to change that, that's motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Harding, thank you. Any further discussion?
So just to clarify, we would be taking out the number 10 square feet and just amending it to state the standard animal husbandry guidelines, correct?
That's as how I understood it. Is that, did I
Okay.
get that correct? Councilmember Cruz?
Yeah, there's a further sentence a little bit down. It says the poultry runs shall be sized appropriately to accommodate the total number of poultry kept at any time. And you could put based on standard bird specific animal husbandry rules.
Okay.
Same language added at the, somewhere in that sentence.
Okay, so is that clear, Councilmember Harding?
Yep. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay,
Thanks.
So that's been motioned and seconded, and if no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so I saw 6 aye and 2 nay.
5 aye, 2
I
nay.
think that's 8 people.
What about
Or
that?
multiply.
5 aye, 2 nay. So that does pass, and brings us again to the original item as amended with these 3 items. Any other discussion from council on it? I did see TJ Frine's hand earlier, so Mr. Frine, I'll go ahead and give you the ability to speak here. If you could just please give name and address for the record, sir.
TJ Frine, 1319 Austin Way. I may be, they kind of all blend together. So I just wondered, the 25 foot, was that from your individual property line? I know there was some discussion about that in the committee of using somebody else's property distance to create your 25 feet. And then also just want to verify that HOAs and covenants would trump this ordinance. So if the Green Hill Village HOA says no birds, then there's no birds regardless of what the city ordinance may say. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Good questions. So for Mr. Rogers, that HOA provision, do they get to say that they don't allow them in their neighborhoods?
As long as the deed of dedication restrictive covenants either bans them outright or grants the authority to the HOA to determine those kinds of rules.
Okay.
So those are private agreements among the owners.
The enforcement of that is by the HOA, not by the city.
Right.
Good.
Yeah, the city doesn't adopt those covenants. So
Okay, and then the second part was the distance, the 25-foot distance. As I understood it, it was from a residential dwelling rather than from the property line. Is that correct?
Yes, the ordinance reads that section 6-301B, no part of the poultry coop or poultry run shall be located within 25 feet of a dwelling located on an adjoining property. And then it goes on from there.
Okay, thank you.
So for clarification,
Yes, Councilor DeVera, please.
for clarification then on that 6301B, which I think is what Dave Sires was trying to get to, you basically could put your chicken, poultry, and co-op and run closer to your neighbor's house than your own, because it's not saying off your property line, but 25 feet from the adjoining property. So
That's correct.
So even though your neighbor may not want the chicken coop or chickens, they could be technically closer to them than to the person who owns them.
So long as they're in the rear yard.
Where by amending that, like I'm sure there's 25 foot from your property line, that would put it directly on the person's property that wants it and further from the neighbor. Correct?
Well, it could. I guess there are properties where the lot width is somewhere around 60 feet, maybe 70 feet. So by the time you do 25 feet from a property line, you might have difficulty getting the right sizing of a coop and a run, possibly.
Could I respond to that?
Yes, Councilor Cruz, please.
I know somewhere in the language here, there's referencing the ability to put your coop or your area inside an existing garage. And those buildings may or may not be the way Councilperson DeBurr is describing. It would be within 25 feet of the property line because whatever the standard setback is, or years back when there may not have been as big of a setback required. So you're getting a little restrictive there, and chickens inside of your garage, I don't see that would be a problem for the neighbors. And then you got the nuisance ordinance to come in play there if there's a problem. Some of the remarks I've heard is that, geez, I never knew we had chickens in Cedar Falls. And I didn't know the neighbor had them and that sort of thing, so.
Okay, so looking at that, I didn't see anything else that was an action or a change request or a grounds for motion. So I don't see any other public comment on this currently. So is there anything else that council would want to discuss with those amendments and to go back to that original item 14? Are you ready to call the question to vote on 14?
Can I have one more item here?
Councilmember Cruz?
I like the land use permit, getting dimensions and everything properly set up. As far as licensing, I would be in favor of a one-time license myself, instead of having to give staff more work to do to check this all the time.
So would you like to push that as an amendment as well?
Correct. I would motion to have a one-time licensing of your birds.
Okay, so that's been motioned. Is there a second for that?
Second that.
Okay, a second from Councilmember Miller. So open that for council discussion as well.
The reason
Dogs have to be licensed every year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they do.
chickens are better than dogs or what?
Well, the point being,
Go ahead.
may I respond, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
With smaller creatures such as the birds, you have animals, poultry, dying, you replace them, the number will fluctuate. And I think there's reference in here that if the number fluctuates, you got to get a new license. And that's
Only
problematic and labor intensive.
it says that you only have to get a new license if you increase the number. If you decrease the number, you don't have to get another license.
Right. So I mean, if you're going to build a coop, you're going to build it for what your target is. And unless you're overwhelmed and really enjoy your birds to expand, which I have read that does happen, then you need I'm assuming a new land use permit to change the size of your coop.
Correct.
Okay. So when you get a new land use permit, you then have to renew that license for that a coop. And so if you don't change your bird number, you're always going to have 10 chickens, let's say. They might drop to 9 or 8. They pass on, they get old, and so on. A one-time license seems sufficient to cover the fact that you are having chickens. It's not quite the same as dogs. I mean, I don't know that we regulate how many dogs a house has or how many cats and that sort of thing. So I understand you license dogs, and I truly wonder how many people really do. But
I have a question,
Yes,
Mr. Mayor. Would staff, can we get some insight on what the pros or the cons would be of not licensing every year? Why we decided to go with every year?
Our proposal is just simply to be consistent with the way we approach cats and dogs so that there isn't confusion about why one and not the other type of thing. It also allows that if there are changes, we're kind of monitoring that. So if the number increases, then it might start the conversation about, oh, we need to revisit that land use permit and make sure that's valid, because we did specifically state in the ordinance that if there aren't any changes to the number, or if it goes down, for example, the land use permit doesn't need to be renewed every year. That just continues unless there's a change upward where we need to deal with the sizing.
I can understand the consistency. That makes sense. But it's kind of a sideways question, but what's the logic behind the licensing of the dog every year and not just a one-time license for the length of the dog's tenure with that family?
Not sure if the city clerk might be able to answer that since she deals with that.
So they can prove their rabies shots.
That's correct.
Okay. Are there any shots or anything that birds would have to get that we know of, or any health issue besides the?
I've never had any poultry, so I couldn't answer that.
Daryl?
I cannot recall anything.
I can.
There might be certain diseases, but not that it would pertain to licensing, rabies.
Councilmember Cyrus?
Believe it or not, my daughter, the veterinarian, studied chickens in Ireland, and they have all kinds of different diseases she told me about that can be given over to humans, and humans actually start to think of them as their pets and hug them and get all kinds of things. But that's not my point. The point is they get these things called litter mites, and we used to spray for them over on the chicken farm that I worked on. So there are some health issues to think about. Maybe every year might be a good idea to have my friend Camyar, like I was trying to say, he would inspect the coops, the chickens and all those things and set up a committee. And I think that might be a good way to go. And then you would know about some of these concerns. My daughter, if she was here, she's in Kansas City, would have been glad to talk, but she's not. So that's about as far as I know about chickens.
Yeah, one of the things for me looking at it, I like the idea of a license, an annual license, just so that there's annual accountability to ensure that they're following practices. And I'm curious if we know if there's any other registry or anything that chicken and poultry owners would have to tie into at the state level to where we could tell who's got chickens in any given year, or would that license be the only way we would know? Is there a state chicken registry or anything like
Mayor,
that?
I'm not aware of any such registry like that.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Cruz?
I don't have it in front of me, but we had a bid put together of other cities that allow chickens, and there was quite a number that had much more than 10. But at the same time, there was a good number of them that didn't have any license at all. So the practice of having poultry in other communities is there, and I think you would have heard about it now if there was any extensive problems with it.
Yeah, so looking at this amendment as it is, as I recall, could you read it, Madam Clerk, what the amendment up for discussion is?
Yes, I believe it was to change to a one-time licensing for the life of the coop, whatever.
Okay, and then would that change then if they increase the number, then they would have to apply for a new license? Is that what you're going for, Councilmember Cruz?
Well, if you understand raising poultry, chickens specifically, you, for lack of a better, purge your flock. You replace them every 3, 4, 5 years because the laying ability diminishes as they get older. So you rotate your flock. So you'll go from 10, 9 to 0 and then go get some more. And then, do we relicense, turn in your license when you have none, and then you get it back again when you get 10 replacements? So it's a different type of animal than a dog or a cat. I'd say the lifespan is considerably shorter, especially if you're using it for egg production. So that's kind of why I thought of the one-time license.
Okay. So its motion on the floor is an amendment to the original document as amended for a one-time license rather than an annual license. Any final discussion from council? And then I'll take an up down. Okay, so all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so I'd like to see a raise of hands for that. For all voting aye, raise your hand, please. I see 3 ayes and all opposed. 4 nays. So that fails and keeps it as the annual license requirement. Any final discussion from council? And then we'll vote on 14. Seeing, yes, Councilmember DeBerg, please.
Is this the opportunity then not to make an amendment, but to say why I am not in favor of this?
Yes, you can.
One, I do agree with staff. I think 10 is too many. You should start with a smaller number if you're going to do it. And I really do feel that the 25-foot to the dwelling instead of to the property line is very unfair, because you can put your coop closer to your neighbor than even probably to your own home if you wanted to. And I don't think that's fair to the neighbors.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Cyrus, please go ahead.
I just have a short comment. I don't mean to get out of line from time to time, but I want people to have whatever kind of pet they want. I'm not against that. I think 10's too many, and a few other things. And I didn't want to get right down to the nitty gritties because there's so many different things. So I want people to have the kind of pets. I don't think some of these things quite fit in. So that's all I have to say about that. We have a $100 million budget. I just don't think chickens are all that important, whether they have them or not. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cyrus. Any final comments from council? Then it's been motioned and seconded, and all in favor, or excuse
It's
me,
roll call.
this requires a roll call vote.
Cyrus,
Nay.
Dunn,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Nay.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
5 voting aye, 2 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass, and we'll have to also vote on the other, on 15 and 16, even though we've discussed those. We still need to go through, and we can have a discussion of those as item particulars as well. So item 15 is passing an ordinance amending Chapter 6 Animals of the Code Ordinances, establishing regulations for rear yard poultry in residential areas upon its first consideration. Is there a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
So second.
The motion and seconded, and my understanding from the last run, and this is where it ties into, you know, the consensus of council really rules here. It was already changed or already amended previously to change the rear yard poultry requirements as it pertains to the dimensions. So is there any objection to considering that as amended? Or do we need to discuss that in this item? It'd be kind of dangerous too.
It's my assumption that when we just said we were going to go forward with all of them as a lump, that when we amended, some of the stuff we actually amended was actually in 15, not in 14. So I'd be
Right.
comfortable voting for it all.
Okay. So any other concerns about that? Seems to make the most sense for how we're proceeding on this. Is there anything else in that section of the code and under item 15 that council wants to discuss to change at this point that hasn't already been settled? Okay, so I'm looking at it. Okay, yeah, much smaller document. So anything else? And then I'll open it up for public discussion as well. If you want to raise your hand with this raise hand icon or press *9 if you have questions or comments on part 15. Okay, I'm seeing none here. So actually I see TJ Frine again. Go ahead, sir. Let me just unmute you here. Go ahead, Mr. Frine. Okay, I still see you muted here, so let's give it a shot again.
Go on now.
Go ahead, sir. I hear you.
Sorry. So there was some talk about kind of revisiting things a year from now. Would it be, or at least look at putting some kind of sunset clause in place for this ordinance? As far as if we want to go and visit it from now, it would then expire a year from now, and so it would have to be brought back for session again. Just one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Frine. So, a question about a sunset clause. I would give that as an option for council to request an amendment. Mr. Rogers, do you have anything to add about a sunset clause, the legality of it, or no? So, if council wants to motion it forward, we certainly can discuss it. Okay, I'm seeing none. So, with that, any final discussion on 15? Since we covered most of it, and I'm seeing none. So it's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Cyrus,
Hey.
Dunn,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Nay.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
5 voting aye, 2 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And that takes us over to 16, which is passing an ordinance amending Chapter 15, the nuisances of the Code of Ordinances relative to keeping poultry in residential areas on its first consideration. Is there a motion to approve this?
I'll move.
So,
Motion
second.
is seconded and open for discussion.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Miller. Go ahead, sir.
Assuming this may pass along the same vote, I just want to say thanks to staff for number 3 here, I think, or number 4 since I've been in office, that we've talked about chickens and point out how many different places something like this affects, and the background work that staff has done to try and make sure all of the bases are covered. I don't agree with all of them, but I want to see chickens in Cedar Falls. So thank you.
I second that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Same. It's a lot of work.
So 16 has been motioned and seconded, and if no further comment, it requires a roll call vote.
Cyrus,
Nay.
Dunn,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Nay.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
5 voting aye, 2 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that passes, and what it means is, since this is an ordinance change, it requires 3 readings. So this is the first of 3 readings. First reading is the only opportunity that we have in this pipeline to offer amendments and to make the changes that are desired. When it comes before council for the second and third readings, it will show at those meetings as amended, and council will be voting to approve those. So it'll be up for a vote, just so people don't break out the champagne early, who are chicken fans. Let's look to have that meeting on February 1st will be the second reading, and then the meeting on February 15th will be the required third reading. So at that point, if it passes those 2 hurdles, then it would be approved and enacted on the 15th of February. So just be clear about that. Sometimes people jump the gun a little bit. So with that brings us over to bills and payroll, which item 17, is there a motion to allow bills and
So
payroll?
moved.
Thanks.
Second.
And seconded, and this requires a roll call vote.
Cyrus,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Dara,
Aye.
all voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us over to City Council referrals. Do council members have any items to refer tonight?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Cyrus?
since this is kind of an odd year with the COVID and everything and people trying to get outside and get a little exercise, I wonder if it's possible that since we haven't had a lot of snow, the snow plows could run down the sidewalk along Green Hill. Every time I go down there, it's kind of behind Frank's house, I see a tremendous amount of people out walking and jogging, and the college kids up here around my house. It'd just be nice if we jumped a pickup on there and just cleaned the sidewalk. It'd only take a little while since we're a little, not the very first day it snows, but just, a few days afterwards might be kind of nice. Let people get out and have a little more walkability on some of these nice, big, beautiful sidewalks we put in. That's just kind of my thought. I think the rest of the council would probably agree with that.
So it's for a referral, trying to think how we would refer something like that.
Would it be referral, or could we just talk about it at updates and see what staff, if we could get a consensus?
So Councilmember Cyrus, would you mind that if we just use that as a?
No, I don't mind at all. I just would like to get the little snow off the sidewalk so people can ride their bikes, because it's going to be nice and it's kind of melted off here and there, and would have been a nice thing. Whatever we need to do, it's just something that I thought would be awfully nice right now.
Do we have any council referrals tonight? Okay, seeing none, then under updates, Councilmember Cyrus had that question about the Green Hill Road. Is that something that could be added into the staff's list? It's not part of our winter trails map. But maybe Director Schrage, can you comment on that, of when those happen?
Sure. The section of Green Hill Road is not currently on our clearing list. We did have a lot of inquiries from our first snowfall, that 5 to 6 inches that we got, about the higher use pedestrian trails. And with the year of COVID and more individuals trying to get out and get some exercise, we actually did take it upon ourselves to clear some of those sections of trail, and Green Hill Road was one of them last week that we did. And obviously we did get a couple inches over the weekend, and actually we got crews out there doing priority streets right now. So it's one of those things that takes quite a bit of staff time to clear additional trail sections, but we understand the circumstances this year with some of those sections. So.
Okay, and it would be worth with the winter trail map, adding that as a council discussion item. If you want to have that added to the map itself, it would just need to be a reapproval of that map. Resourcing.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to see it all the way up to 27th Street. It gets a tremendous amount of foot traffic from the college kids. They walk from the big apartments down here pretty close to my house all the way up around, and all just jump on it with a pickup, and I don't think it'd take too much, but that's all.
Sure. I'm trying to think of how I make it so it's not just one council member saying it. Would council object to having staff take this action as funds are available, or dedicating funds to?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No.
Actually, my only addition to that conversation in Green Hill, historically, I don't know if they do anymore, but Waterloo used to always plow Green Hill up to the Cedar Falls city limit, and then we didn't. Maybe they don't do that anymore, but it sure makes a lot of sense as actually transportation, a route that people might take to go to work if we were to clean it. But I don't know if Waterloo still does. They did.
Are you Councilor Adair, are you talking about the trail or the actual roadway?
Green Hill, the bike trail.
Okay.
The 10-foot bike trail, or 12-foot, or whatever it is.
Okay.
The one that Dave's talking about.
All right. So I'm seeing the council consensus that they would like to see staff clear that trail when possible, and certainly we'll move to having it in the map so it's official in the future, and it can calculate funds that are needed to dedicate to that. Anything else for council updates tonight? Yes, Councilmember DeBrew.
I've gotten a couple complaints about some beggars downtown approaching people, and in this time of COVID, is there anything else we can do to get them to not approach people?
Okay, Director Chief Birdie, do you have a comment for that?
Well, we've heard of those complaints before, and really, if they're blocking traffic or blocking pedestrian traffic, the police could do something about that. But just approaching them and having a conversation with them, that's not in violation of any ordinance.
I got a follow-up question.
Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
So the entertainers type of people playing guitars and whatever they do, that's within our code to allow that as long as they don't hassle the people walking by type of thing?
Well, and there's been somebody on a drum set, somebody with guitars out there for years. It really comes down to whether they're blocking the sidewalk or blocking the walkway. And then if the noise bothers something, we can enforce the noise ordinance. But for somebody playing their guitar, doing the other things they do, it's went on for years or decades, and we get very few complaints. But if they start to block the sidewalk or there's a problem, then we can deal with it.
So another question, I believe I've seen some of the same complaints that Susan mentioned, where they might walk along and walk next to somebody and beg them for $1, beg them for a nickel, that sort of thing. That's not allowed?
No, that's not illegal. That is allowed.
That is allowed, as long as they don't.
I don't know what the violation would be,
Okay.
Well, there is it's called panhandling, I guess. I'm assuming, coming from a different city. Some cities have approached where they say panhandling is illegal, which is where you're maybe I'm getting my definitions wrong, but begging for money. But as far as like Chief Birdie's saying, if you just walk up and talk to someone, you can't really make that illegal. And as far as playing on the side of the street, that's called busking. And that is something that many cities allow because they think it brings culture and like, again, like Chief Birdie was saying, as long as they're not blocking the sidewalk or being too loud, cities generally approve of busking but disapprove of panhandling. So if we wanted to do something, we would have to look as a council at creating an ordinance that makes panhandling illegal.
Yep,
I
I
just
would
jump
agree.
in, Mr. Mayor, that would be unlawful. That would be infringing on folks' First Amendment rights, because you would be regulating their speech of discussing a contribution. So in concept, First Amendment wise, that's no different than a store inviting you in to buy something.
Well,
There's specific, there's strong Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals decisions that say that cities cannot regulate speech like that. They can regulate for safety purposes, as Chief Birdie was talking about, if they're blocking sidewalk. Of course, threats are a different matter, but simply having a conversation about money, the city couldn't lawfully regulate that.
So what can we do to keep them from running up to you and wanting to talk to you, or not accosting you, but asking you for cigarettes or money when you don't want them coming up to you?
So, like I said, attempt at regulation like that would be struck down pretty quickly as a violation of one's constitutional rights, because now, if it's a threat, if they do it in a threatening manner, that's a different story. But a conversation, the city can't prohibit that kind of speech. It would be regulating directly because of what they're saying, which the courts really frown on.
Mr. Rogers?
And is it an annoyance to some people? Yeah, sure it is.
Councilmember Cruz.
Is there a definition of personal space? Like I'm walking one direction and they're right in front of me, and they stay 2 feet away, but they're right in front of me, I suppose I can't reach out and grab my arm or tug on my shirt or something and say, hey, give me $1.
They can't have contact. That's unlawful.
Assault, or what would that be considered?
Could be.
What's the saying? Your right to swing your arm ends at my nose, or something like that. Is the legal term for it?
I would say too, we get very few complaints about them. But if somebody would be aggressive or intoxicated, or there was other actions going on, we could deal with that, and we do deal with that. But we get very few complaints about, whether it's a guitar or the drum set or people asking for money.
Well, it would be, drunkenness or under influence of drugs.
Yeah.
The guitar thing is the ambiance of downtown. I think that's to Simon's comment. I like that. Adds a little touch of character.
Okay, so that still has us in council updates. Any other updates from council? Okay, then that moves us over to staff updates. Do we have anything from staff tonight?
I don't think so this evening, Mayor.
All right, well, then with that, I will move us over to public forum, and speakers will have one opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on topics germane to city business. So I see a few hands from the public, and if you'd like to add in, go ahead and press your *9 or the raise hand icon, so just so I know that you're there. And first, I'll start off with Rick Sharp. So go ahead, Mr. Sharp. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
All right, Rick Sharp, 1623 Burke Street, Cedar Falls.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
So I'm going to discuss kind of what I brought up last week, last council meeting, and respond to the comments that were made when I asked to have the school administration building purchased and the 18th and Main Fire Station closing. So I know that the CIP is a planning document, but seeing that this is projected for FY24, I will make this an election topic for this November. The majority of you are up for re-election and may be seated up there when this occurs. So let's have the incumbents defend the closure and purchase, and if there are candidates opposed, let them have their say. Director Olson mentioned the study done in 2015 that recommended the closure of North Cedar. He said 95% of the calls came out of 18th and Main. So where is the new study that recommends the closure of 18th and Main? Where is the call volume for that? The city has changed over the last 6 years, 8 to 10 years when the building may be built, so wouldn't it be appropriate for a study to be done to verify location? Also, the study was done showing properties that the city already owns. The school admin building wasn't on that study. It was the state patrol building. So why not have a true study done, not showing land the city owns, but actually ideal locations for fire station, even if it means buying homeowners or business properties. Director stated the location on First Street would shorten response times to North Cedar. That is obvious, but again, he failed to mention that the closure would increase response times to the following areas. Response times will increase in the Cedar Heights area, commercial and residential properties along University Avenue corridor all the way to Waterloo. Response times will increase to residential neighborhoods west of Main Street and to the UNI campus and surrounding areas. Response times will increase at portions of downtown district. These are the facts of what will happen if 18th and Main is closed, and they are undisputable. This director made a comment that the distance travel from 18th and Main to University Avenue and the public safety headquarters to University Avenue is fairly close, and it wouldn't be much of a response difference there. So I'd like to ask for a definition of fairly close, and is the city willing to accept an increase in response times to the areas I mentioned? And I'm not going to argue that both stations can reach the intersection of University and Main around the same time. I'm saying as you head east on University Avenue from John Deere Motors towards Waterloo, the 18th and Main station has had a significant response advantage using the 58 on-off ramp and the Waterloo Road to University Avenue. Common sense shows this to be the case, no disputing it. Director Olson also made a comment that the paramedics may possibly relocate to the new hospital built along Green Hill Road. The key word is may relocate. There's no timetable for Mercy to build that hospital, as once they purchased Artoria from Wheaton, the new hospital is kicked down the road for an undetermined time. He also mentioned the possibility of paramedics being put in the proposed new substation on First Street as it being a strategic location for them. My question is, what happened to the paramedics being stationed in the new headquarters once it was completed? They were stationed at that site long before the fire station moved in. Then they didn't move in after the headquarters was built. I'm sure for strategic reasons, the paramedics would prefer to be there. What happened to those discussions between the city and Mercy? Did the city want too much money in a lease agreement? Everyone knows paramedics responding from South Main is a lot quicker than responding from Chancellor. Director also stated that adding 2 more stations would have to increase staffing, and there has been no study done to see if a 3rd station is needed. Why not? Cedar Falls is a growing city, and the staff and council's only solution is to keep relocating stations from one area to another. By doing so, you are saying you are okay with increased response times and consequences of that. I was not asking for 4 stations, although it would be preferred for advanced planning and growth. I said 3 stations is what the city needs, and I proposed an excellent location on city property. The director said the city would have to hire more people, but with the PSO model, don't we have more people than ever before? I know we have more personnel than we did prior to the PSO model. The city could easily have 2 stations staffed with 2 PSOs each. 1718 Main Street is currently staffed with 2 PSOs, and have what's that?
Just 1 minute remaining.
I got it. And have 4 PSOs at the headquarters. Now, Councilmember Miller stated that the PSO program has allowed for staffing at North Cedar, and Olson agrees, but that's kind of a misleading statement. North Cedar is staffed a few hours each day by closing and moving staff from 18th and Main to cover North Cedar, robbing Peter to pay Paul. The city could have been easily doing that station closure when they had the traditional firefighting staffing, yet they chose not to. So the PSO program had nothing to do with this. So in the end, do you support and accept increased response time by closing a station to relocate it to another area while the city is growing? I will continue to bring this issue up because it will be faced by the next council, and I don't want to have plans, contracts, or whatever else the city needs to do already in the process prior to the actual purchase in 2 years, and then have the council say they have to move forward the purchase irregardless. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. And I see Mr. Skane. So go ahead with name and address for the record, please, sir. And then I'll do Jerry Celentic next. So yes, Mr. Skane, go ahead, sir.
Yes, Jim Skane, 2215 Clay Street.
Good evening, sir.
And I want to talk about Germain. I have looked through the Robert's rules, which I'm glad that you're beginning to use. And I find that there is no place where Germain is applied to the freedom of speech. And the way that it has been applied in the language about the public forum is that it was applied so that a member of the council or the mayor could rule someone out of order simply because they didn't think that what the person was saying was germane. So I would repeat what I've said before, is that you should be consistent with the Constitution and remove that word as it relates to the public forum. Now let's talk about where germane does apply, and it applies to motions that are made and then someone makes an amendment. Now, in order to be germane, the motion, the amendment must relate to the motion that had been made. But saying that, it can be germane if even the amendment to the amendment could be germane if it relates to the main motion. In fact, it says in Roberts that an amendment can be germane even if it proposes the opposite. For example, if you are saying that the motion says you want to prohibit parking on a particular street, the amendment can be that the parking be permitted on that street and still be germane. But the point is that germane applies to relatedness. If it relates to the main motion, it is germane. And it is important, I think, to people to know that the key word is it has to relate. Even if it argues that it's something that was made, you can amend it by saying just the opposite. So I would hope that the council would realize that two things. One, you are violating the Constitution when you put germane beside speech, as has been just in the last discussion made by Attorney Rogers. And so the second thing is that even if you are asking that what the original was done, you can amend it if it relates to that motion, even if it's just the opposite. So please continue what you are starting to do, and that is to use Roberts. And I thought that there was a really positive discussion. But again, an amendment is debatable, and I think that it's improper to say that a comment that somebody makes is out of order. But thank you very much for beginning to use Roberts and to learn as you go along, because it is very good what's happened. I mean, I think that where the public forum, 5 minutes.
Sorry, you are at time, sir.
Okay, fine.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night, sir. Okay, and I see Jeremy Salentik to speak next. So go ahead, sir. A name and address for the record, please.
Jeremy Salentik, 1008 Rockland Street, Cedar Falls.
Evening, Mr. Slendick.
All right. Okay. Well, the first and foremost thing I have here that my wife asked me to address is when they did the street project and they finished the school out here at North Cedar, they took the original stoplight style crossing out. And someone I heard somewhere said, well, I mean, it tends to not be safe because people are used to seeing it green all the time. But that is not necessarily the case. I mean, during the school year and, before and after school, people are using that to cross. So they switched it over for the yellow flashing caution light. My wife talked to somebody down there in engineering and asked when they were going to get a strobe crossing light that would be more effective at warning drivers. I mean, a flashing yellow light, I think people ignore that more than they would a stoplight and kind of just zoom through. I mean, I realize it's not always flash and it doesn't flash until you press the crosswalk button, but nonetheless, we want our children to be safe out here crossing the road. A lot of our kids out here walk to school and have to use that crossing. And I almost think it was better to just leave the old stoplight in there than these yellow caution lights. At least we could put a strobe out there. And I don't know, how soon that can be done. I mean, it was, just an idea from us to make sure that the kids that are walking to school are safe. So I'll move on to some other things here. I didn't get a chance to chime in. I came into the meeting late and you guys were talking about the chickens and I'm like, a lot of talk about that. And I'm like sitting here thinking, it's like, okay, well, if you pass this ordinance, is everybody in Cedar Falls going to run out and get chickens? No, probably not. I'm willing to bet that the majority of people, if they're going to get chickens, are probably going to be out here in North Cedar. I don't see somebody out on Algonquin Drive putting in a chicken coop. So, I mean, maybe, but I wouldn't think that those people would want chickens. So, but that was just my thing. And then somebody said, well, what's the difference about licensing a chicken once a year or one time and then licensing a dog? And it's why are dogs licensed every year? Well, it is a form of taxation to raise money for the city. So, okay. And then a comment about the busking versus panhandling. And whereas I realize that people get annoyed when somebody comes up and is trying to bum money off of them and stuff, I have to agree with our police chief and our attorney on this one that, yeah, I mean, it may annoy you, but it's a First Amendment right. They can, I mean, you can't violate their free speech and say, well, you can come up and talk to people, but you can't ask them for money. And I like, I wouldn't want that to interfere with the busking that's going on. I've always loved the fact that people can just grab a guitar, go down there and play. And, if people want to throw some change in their guitar case, they can do that. Final thought here on the germane topic. And is the reason why we use germane in the public forum because we only want the people when they come to public forum to talk about city business. I mean, is this to stop people from if I want to come on there and say, oh, I want to talk about how great my kids' grades are this year and I just want to brag them up in front of the city, or I want to brag up the fact that my son wants to start a homeless shelter or so on and so forth. I mean, is that the purpose of that germane? Because, I mean, I always thought that public forum was kind of just open to whatever you wanted to talk about. So I'm finished.
Thank you, Mr. Slendick. So that I'll just address for my thoughts on open forum or public forum. As I understand it, it's a time for the public to speak about city issues, and I understand that there's some consternation about that out there for wanting to have it as an open, basically a soapbox, like a soapbox in Overman Park, where you can just say whatever you want. We do want to keep it focused on things that the city, we can actually take action on. So it's not meant just for free broadcasting time to talk about your kids' great grades or your opinion on gun rights or something happening in Washington, D.C. We see that in order to have a focused and productive time together, you've got a captive audience of council members and city staff, and this is a perfect time to rail against the city and the things that we're doing. And certainly we support your rights to say that, and we encourage that kind of dialogue. It's not, as it's been brought up previously, it's not required by the Iowa Open Meetings law to have a public session, but we appreciate the important value, and council greatly appreciates having that kind of interaction and input from council or from citizens at these meetings. But it does come with restrictions, and relevance is part of that. It's called germaneness sometimes, relevance. I think it refers to it in Robert's rules now, but it's a real thing and it's important. Does council have anything you want to add on that, or staff? Did I capture the sentiment? Okay, thanks. Well, I see no other public comment items, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We don't even need a show of hands. We are adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a terrific night.
Thanks.